Welcome to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and during this series, I'll be interviewing various thought leaders, wellness experts, and humans on how they practice sustainable self-care and mindfulness. We'll get real and raw, talk about the light and the shadow side of self-care and mindfulness, and how we can actually stay centered amid the chaos and the hustle and bustle of our modern day world. So settle in and get centered. This podcast episode is brought to you by Centered in the City, a virtual on-demand self-care and mindfulness platform with over 200 different meditations, journaling prompts, nourishing recipes, and Pilates flows, all designed to support you feeling calm, focused, and energized as you live your life in this modern day world. For more information, head on over to centeredinthecity.org and claim your 7-day free trial. Welcome back to the Centered in the City podcast. Today's conversation is very much of a heart-opening and mind-opening conversation. So I welcome you to really pay attention to how do you feel while you're listening to some of the shit we talk about. We talk about trauma, we talk about racism, anti-racism, white supremacy. So some heavy topics of how we can bring our mindfulness practice to the sufferings that we as humans experience in this world. I'm so honored to have Aiko Smith be our guest today, who is a 2-time TEDx speaker. She is also a mindfulness facilitator through UCLA Semel Institute of Neuroscience and Human Behavior. We are graduation buddies. I knew Aiko would be the perfect guest to have these hard conversations because she is so passionate based on her experience of navigating systems of poverty and racism to give unique perspectives of what individuals and communities require to achieve wellness. Aiko's life mission is to teach evidence-based mindfulness practices and tools for daily life as an integral part of cultivating an awareness that dismantles internal and external systems of harm. Feels like my heart just explodes hearing that, knowing that. So you're going to learn so much from this episode. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Aiko, welcome to the Centered in the City podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I want to begin with one of my favorite questions. And even though I've asked a lot of guests this, it's so fun to hear what comes up for people. What right now in this phase of your life are certain practices that you're committing to on a daily or daily-ish basis that you know really keep you centered?
I meant self-care is everything. That's what I preach. I feel like that's the opening door to all practices, having that time alone. And in this season of my life, my nighttime self-care routine is just being in water. And my kids are like, "Are you okay? Why are you in the bathtub so much?" But it just feels like a space that's safe and nourishing and warm, and just being in that flow space, I feel like I get great ideas. I get a lot of clarity and just feeling more like light and fresh and like I'm really taking care of myself. So my bath time at night is part of my ritual that's been really grounding and nourishing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, can you give us some more context? Like, do you like bubble bath or Epsom salts, or do you like candles, or do you keep it super minimalist, or like
I
bring a
like
book in?
I have a book. I like my bathroom has become my sanctuary. I even moved like a chair in there. So like I have like this, like an armchair in my bathroom. My bathroom's small. It doesn't deserve it, but there's an armchair in there. So like I'll turn my bath on. I'll put bubbles in there. I have Palo Santo and candles, and I'll just like make it smell like lovely. And while my bath is running, I'll sit in that chair and like listen to the water run and like have this kind of like aromatherapy moment just while and just kind of grounding there. I get kind of like, am I in freeze mode because I'll get really still, and the bath will fill up, and I'll kind of, I don't know if it's being mindful or mindless, but that time, guys, goes really fast. Usually takes like 15 minutes, but it feels like a second or two. And just grounding into that space of just doing nothing and allowing my brain to just rest without planning, I'm not like rehashing what happened in the day. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just kind of like allowing myself the time to sit and do nothing. And it feels like a great space to enter a bathtub in. Like now I'm like really going deep now. I'm in warm water. I'm I'm just like filled with like just peace and grounded. I'm grounded in the moment, and all my senses are being used to just help me just be centered there. So it feels just like rejuvenating after a long day of, the hustle and bustle, kids, work, all of that. It's really just like a refuge.
Yeah. It's interesting. I hear a lot of moms use the bathroom as their sacred space. And it makes sense because reflecting back when, growing up, my mom was a huge bath person, and she too would just like settle in the bathtub. She would bring her newspapers and just read and be there from like 11 to 12:30 at night. Like she would just like love that sacred quiet space. So it's so interesting to hear you like have your chair, you create this whole atmosphere for yourself. And I love it within the Center and City platform. I have a bubble bath meditation
You.
and practice because I think there is that sense of slowing down, like hearing the water start to fill the bath. Like, what does that do to even our senses? Because
Mhm.
water and that waterfall sound can be so healing for a lot of us. And yeah, to connect to the smells if you add essential oils in. And so I love that. It sounds like you have that practice for yourself.
Yeah, it used to be the opposite. I used to wake up really early, like 5 a.m. club. It was a little bit of performative stuff, to be honest with you, because I wanted to like make sure that I got my workout in and my meditation in and like plan my meals and like do all of that. And there wasn't a lot of compassion for me in that space. It was more like, check it off the list, check it off the list. And now I feel good because I got that done, but not in this kind of soul nourishing, grounded, connected way that really is rejuvenating, regenerating, that gives me the energy to go forward. I would do that little morning routine and then need a nap, after.
Yes.
Then it would be hard to go on with my day because I'd be like exhausted from like running 3 miles and doing that. I mean, I look great, but I didn't feel too good. So
Mm.
now as I'm getting older, that's more important to me.
Thank you for calling that out because I think there is so much performativeness around having to have the perfect morning routine and fitting it all in. And to differentiate for yourself and hopefully for listeners of like what feels like it's something to be checked off on a list and what is maybe filling that superficial need and what's actually filling that soulful deep rooted sense of like filling your cup up, which I'm hearing you're slowing down, which with the nighttime routine really helps you slow down to do. I want to talk about, you know, it sounds like, as you're recognizing, you mentioned the word like as the bath is filling, I'm like questioning, am I in a freeze state when I'm listening to the water? And then you notice like, you get into the bath and it sounds like it just melts off of your body, whatever you notice you're holding. And you
Mhm.
and I've talked about being meditation teachers, trauma sensitive mindfulness work. And if you use that lens, like what do you feel like is happening inside of your body as you're noticing like the sense of freeze or holding on to in the day, and then this like permission to maybe let go or something as you get into the bath?
Yeah. I grew up really poor, a mixed race woman. I'm Black and Japanese. I grew up in a majority white space with an immigrant mother. And my community was beautiful and lovely and caring and compassionate towards me. And I was really fortunate to have really good friends that are still my friends today, help me throughout that time in my life. But regardless of how much help I had growing up, there was still a sense of unworthiness that comes from just not being like nurtured and cared for. And not to blame my mother, because she was working hard. She needed to have multiple jobs. Didn't speak English, and she had 3 little Black girls on her own, like in LA. She was hustling. And so um, not to blame her for her absence, but just not having a parent be around when you come home from school, or to help you with your homework, and then feeling, shame about the way that we were presented, like we looked poor, we didn't have furniture, people feeling sorry for us and having that energy of pity kind of shaped my lens in a way that made me feel like I wasn't worth anything. Like the signs of unworthiness were kind of just reflected in my environment, from just like having to use a meal ticket to buy lunch at school, or not having a regular doctor, or just little things like that I was seeing my friends, like this kind of normal, traditional, middle class way of living, and then not meeting that standard. Those kinds of messages just become like an inherited sense of self. And so, like, I think that I'm still battling that worthiness, and it shows up all the time, just being in spaces like corporate spaces where people are still making a lot of money, or dressed, just there's a lot of things that are kind of triggering that sense of like this unworthiness from growing up in poverty, or growing up not being nurtured. And so throughout the day, I'm aware now, because of my practice, like, oh, that's old, thoughts and noises and limiting beliefs that are still there. And they do still have an effect on how I feel about myself and how I'm moving around, like the space I'm in, because I'm trying to elevate into different spaces. And so now I'm dealing with different people. It always kind of feels uncomfortable. And so I think when I give myself permission to, like, I get in the bath, I turn the water on, I shut the door, and I sit there, it's kind of like letting all of that kind of settle down a little bit, like snow in the snow globe. Now I'm sitting there, and all of that has been swirling around like throughout the day gets an opportunity to just settle. And I think that's what that freeze is. Like, I'm just kind of like not having to like think and maneuver around any of those systems and what I was going through, and just kind of just letting it, just settle down. And so I don't know if I'm aware of it happening, but it's like I'm kind of just still, they always say, like, if you don't know what to do, don't do anything at all. And it kind of feels like one of those moments where just like literally and figuratively taking off like the layers of the day and just settling in and really connecting with just who I truly am, which is the breath of this body, just, just the vessel. And so that's what I believe it is. But like I said, I don't know much. I'm still just figuring it all out for myself too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing some of your story and the layers and the conditioning and the societal and like white supremacy layers that are what you grew up in, what you continue to live in, and to notice all of those layers kind of melt away when you sit in the bath and just give yourself, it sounds like, permission to just breathe and be. And maybe I'm just offering this in case this resonates, but you tell me of maybe it's not freeze that's happening for you. Maybe it's a sense of just like equanimity, like that sense of
Yeah.
observing, because it sounds like you're very present to it all and not in like a shutdown phase,
Yeah.
but it sounds like you're observing it all, but just not reacting to it or picking it up.
Yeah, it's
Does
really
that
tough. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's really hard for me to differentiate, having like apathy, because, just for example, like I said, I grew up in all white spaces, and not to fault my classmates or my peers for just not having language or the ignorance, just not knowing about things being said to me, the way they felt, um, just kind of like those microaggressions throughout the day. Like you kind of have to build up this wall, to protect your heart from being hurt all the time. And so, like, people, I get it all the time, like, where you're always in a good mood, and you're always so funny, or you're always so this, or you always, you're light and you're airy and you're grounded. And it's like, or I might just be completely not here, just like I'm gone and my body's here. And maybe that's why you feel like a sense of calm, because I'm just like shutdown mode. So like the line is really thin for me between like being apathetic and being neutral. Like I'm still like, am I here? Am I not here? Am I in this moment, or am I guarding myself?
Yeah.
Very, it's tricky to tell.
That's I really appreciate you discerning that for us and for yourself, of just recognizing how you've had to protect yourself, how you have had to create some walls and kind of put on a energetic face from the outside, but it sounds like inside, just noticing you're navigating bigger emotions or different emotions that you feel like you are able to actually express on the outside. And so to pay attention, is it apathy or is it neutral? And practicing equanimity, I think, is a really interesting like question to sit
Mhm.
with. How do you feel like your mindfulness practice, being obviously a meditation teacher, walking the talk, like how do you feel like your own practice has supported you exploring your trauma of growing up in poverty, the trauma of being a Black Japanese woman in white supremacist culture of America? Like, how do you use your mindfulness practice to support you?
Yeah, I think it's a remembering and an acceptance that, we all don't choose to be born where we are. We don't choose our parents. And we really are like a reflection of the people that are around us and the soup that we're kind of cooked in, And so it's my mindfulness practice has always kind of brought me back to that point in remembering. So I'm not triggered by racism. Obviously it's triggering, but it doesn't affect me. It's this kind of neutral view I have on it, because there's no hatred or blame I don't feel towards people that are kind of displaying that ignorance. I kind of think of it as like we're all socialized that way. And it's an unlearning that has to happen. And so if you don't have anybody in your environment to challenge your thinking, which is really, you'd have to seek that, you're going to think and behave that way. We're socialized here in this country. We have white supremacists, born into it. This is a country from like born slavery. It's just generational. So it's my mindfulness practice always helps me remember that. So I don't have like a lot of animosity or resentfulness about people that are displaying those behaviors, and just being in this body, being a woman, mixed race, grew up poor. It helps me have an open, kind heart towards everybody, because just like I grew up in these circumstances and I was socialized to think and feel this way, so are others. And it's only through our suffering, I believe, and like really being intentional about healing that, do you grow the compassion and space to be aware of others, and how they grew up, and why they think they do, and just not taking it personal, and then also having tools to deal with the emotional reactivity. um, I used to be an angry little middle school girl that like just had it like this, just for no reason, not for no reason at the time. I couldn't answer why. Now I know it's because I was just wanting attention. I needed to be seen and heard and loved. And that just wasn't there because of the conditions. And so just even having compassion for my former selves, my younger self, helps me today just be more aware and conscious of me, how I'm feeling, and others around me. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Oh God, there's so much I want to unpack in what you just shared. And to just share even personally, using my mindfulness practice, like right now, I can notice like I'm feeling nervous and anxious about having this conversation because my white guilt comes up and my sense of discomfort and fear of creating harm shows up. And so just even like noticing what's happening in my own body and being able to name it and use my mindfulness practice to name it is really helpful to just even like have that sense of awareness of the filters that I'm entering this conversation with. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to name that for listeners as we're navigating, to be fully transparent. And to circle back to what you just beautifully shared around having that sense of compassion for not only yourself, but it sounds like for what's just like how people, that sense of understanding of like the biases that people hold. There's that sense of compassion for them. It doesn't make it right for them to not necessarily like challenge and be open to thinking about how other people are growing up within systems that are affecting and challenging their own beliefs, to be able to challenge those implicit biases that we all have. But I also am hearing that sense of care that you have for just suffering, right? The suffering that we all have. And I'm curious, like when you talk about your mindfulness practice, how do you connect that with this deep mission you have around non-harm?
Yeah, I think the first step in any process is awareness, and I feel like people have no awareness that them too, they are suffering. Anxiety is suffering, depression is suffering, stress is suffering, having interpersonal relationship issues, that's suffering. There's a lot of suffering, and it doesn't matter what race, gender, age, everybody is suffering. And I feel like we're all trying to align with some kind of perfection. And so when we're not like meeting those standards of perfection that I believe are just, like come from supremacy culture, wanting to be the best, needing to be the best, and that being the only way to feel like seen, heard, loved, respected, that everybody's suffering. And so I really do, that's why I'm like so big on self-care, is because if you're using your mindfulness, which is, I think, the tool to gain this self-awareness, and you're sitting and you could really connect with what it really means to like the pain of just anxiety, for example. It is painful to be anxious, and once you really are not pushing that away, and you're really able to like recognize it in yourself, and like being like you're a baby still, like you still are, like you're that little baby you, and it's like, like you're doing that to your brain all day, like aren't you tired, like that kind of compassion for yourself, like let me let this up somehow, like that connects you with other people, then you could recognize it in other people just so much easier if you let yourself get there. And so my mission, I don't want to get in the weeds here, about this anti-racism journey. It always starts at awareness, one of your own suffering, and then I think that grows the space to allow recognition of other people's suffering. And then maybe when you take care of yourself well enough, you have the energy to take care of others. And so I think that for me, that's foundational. That's where I start. Other teachers, they take it to the finish line. But I think it's like when I'm working at the intersections of anti-racism and mindfulness, that's where I'm starting. Like, where are you suffering and how can we heal you? How can we get a sense of healing and get tools so you suffer less, so you could care about others more.
Yeah, I love that. So that place of awareness, so growing our capacity to just have awareness of our suffering, or what are the stories that we're telling ourselves, or what are the just even awareness of the systems we're living in. So just having the layers of context of awareness, and that takes time, right, to build.
Yeah, plenty of times. And I think like it's like an onion, like just
Mhm.
becoming a mother, being I was a single mom at one point, I am again. But like just like watching another mom with a newborn baby, like with all her bags, or like trying to find daycare, or like just trying to do the things that moms have to do, make dinner, do like, and you're seeing, if you see a woman or whoever parenting, like you could feel like, oh, I've been through that,
Mm.
I know what that's like. And do you need me to hold that bag while you try to put the baby, or I'll watch your, like it's a natural thing. And that's why they say it's like studied that like poor people are more giving.
Mm.
Because I understand what it poor means. Like if I got $20 and my friend needs 10, it's like, well, I've needed $10 before. And what's this little $20? Like I'm giving half away. And that's how our communities take care of each other, because we understand what we relate to the suffering.
Mm.
So this guise of perfection really does prevent us from being for each other, with each other, and helping each other more. So authenticity is huge for me.
Oof, that hits so deep, your what you just shared there. And I have heard in some of my anti-racism work that I've done in the past how perfectionism is tied to white supremacy.
Yeah.
And that has like been like a pondering that I've stayed with. And you just kind of unlock something for me there of just the sense of like constriction that white supremacist culture has, that sense of needing to kind of like hoard and hold on to and like make sure we hold the best, quote unquote, whatever that is. So like hold that $20, because like we're
Mhm.
going to use that for like the perfect thing. And what I hear you sharing around like, what if we could all untangle from that and tap into more of that compassionate space where the $20 can actually create more abundance when we share it than
Mhm.
if one person was just to hold on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that hierarchy, right? And this is why, like, it's difficult to have conversations about white supremacy, because I think we're all talking about it. And the language that we're using is a little different, or might be different. So, like, just for instance, I have friends, I'm friends with all kinds of folks, right? I have Trumper friends that I went to school with, like, honestly, that I've grown up with. I don't really understand like what the appeal is to this man and whatever, because I don't, that's not my concern. My concern is my friend and her heart, and how she shows up for her family and friends. But the language that we use is different. When I say white supremacy, there's like this automatic guilt and defensiveness that comes from her when I say that, because it's nuanced. We're not talking about white people. We're talking about this system, this way of thinking, this ideology that all people, does regardless of race, can have. Kanye West is a white supremacist, meaning that like he really does believe like if you're white, that means that you're at the top of this hierarchy and it makes you better. And so we're performing to get to the top, because that's what white supremacy says that where we should be, instead of like this. It's an ideology and it's an idea. It's not about race, it's not about color. So even just having that conversation, we need to have the language because it's so nuanced. So we could have ears open instead of like this guilt and shame and like, I don't hear you anymore because I feel like you're talking about my people. It's the same thing when we talk about the patriarchy or toxic masculinity. If you're a woman, you're identify as a woman, you could still have that energy of like male dominating. That's the way it should go. And all your behavior could kind of line up with that. So it's difficult. And so I just love keeping it simple, like we were talking about earlier. Like, let's just stick with the suffering, your own, and what's really, and dealing with that, and then see how the world around you kind of shapes afterwards, because it changes like we all do. And so mindfulness helps us have that beginner's mind. It trains our mind, like we're to let go of what we think things are and really to see what they are truly. And so I think it's the beginning of any anti-racism journey. And I think that's where everybody should start if they're concerned with being a good ally, being out there. Like, you have to know your own suffering first and get it out of the way, so you could do this important work of showing up for others. Like, nobody wants tears. That's what they say, but it's necessary, like
Yeah.
to learn the way people have been suffering. It's sad. My like, it's like walking down the street and then seeing homeless people. And then it's like, well, don't be sad about that. Well, like, it's their suffering and it breaks my heart. And so this whole anti-racism journey, I think, like, has been really like tricky for white folks.
Oh, yeah.
We're not allowed. White folks have been like discouraged from being emotional about it. It is emotional. You're still a human. Yeah, you should cry. You know what I mean? Like, it's sad. But I think, like, I just have compassion for everybody going through the journey. Even like I had my own anti-Blackness that I had to unlearn as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually all doing the same kind of work here. And so,
Yeah, I appreciate you, sharing that, and that we all are coming at this journey from different angles and from different experiences and backgrounds. And, you know, you mentioned like white supremacy is not just like white people, like it's this concept, it's this structure. And I think it's also just important within that awareness lens to recognize, like, yeah, the color of our skin, being a white person, like, can also give us a pass into so much access in our culture that we might not be aware of. And when we can bring awareness to that power that can be held, for me, that has actually been part of my practice of recognizing the suffering. Like, where have I had power over others that I didn't realize? And where did that create harm? And where did that where did that not create space for someone to fully be seen or heard? Because, like, that's one of my missions in life, is to help everybody feel seen and heard. And so when we don't look at all those layers, or when I don't look at all those layers and bring awareness to it, I recognize how I can really cut a lot of people out from being fully seen.
Yeah, I met, Maisha T. Hill, my friend at Check Your Privilege. She has this book, Heal Your Way Forward. And I think that's a great, book that combines like these practices. And then anti-racism, like the journey. I always do a lot of teaching in her community, and I spoke at her conference. But I really love this humanizing that we're doing, or the work that she's doing, because whatever is happening right now is not working. This cancel culture, this, you say one thing wrong and then you're out the door, and like all that nonsense. It's like, like, let's not forget we're all human here, stepping in it all the time, every day, and everybody's literally trying their best, no matter who they are. But their best might be cooked in a different soup than yours, even those like people that I'm like totally side-eyeing all the time, like these anti-abortion people, these people making like these anti-trans laws, and making it harder for Black and brown folks to vote with their redlining and all this garbage. I always think, like, and this isn't an excuse for their behavior at all, but even they are trying to do the best that they can do with their limited knowledge of how we all like can be seen, heard, loved, and cared for. In their minds, they're trying to be good, and so I don't agree, and I think it's really harmful for a lot of folks, but I could recognize, like, there's a little goodness in there for them and what they think, and just humanizing those folks. They're not monsters. They're not any of that. I don't think it's helpful. for us to go about life that way. It's kind of very Martin Luther Kingy, right? But
I
I
was
think
just,
the energy, yeah.
yeah, I was just about to say, like, it's showering them with love, not more hate, even though the policies and their practices are disgusting and toxic and harmful. To not like to shower them with love and compassion and care and hope that they kind of like that phrase, like kill them with kindness, right? Even though we don't want to kill them, like it's just
Right.
that sense of like, if we want to create and feel our humanness, our oneness, we get to recognize that sense of connection within each other. And, political divisiveness, there's just so much divide of them versus us versus them, Democrats, Republicans, and that just creates more divide in our country. And I get there's so much hate and harm, but it's just like what's the path forward?
It's like I always just try to treat everybody. That's why I love mindfulness so much and talking about like our own individual suffering. Like, first of all, mind your business, right? Like what do I care about what's happening over here and over there when I'm worried about paying my light bill or like being anxious about my kid going through that? Like, mind your business, and like treat everybody as human, and like I could obviously, I do not agree, but I could recognize the humanity in somebody and I could recognize that they have families that in their limited views are trying to protect. And I could appreciate that. And then also keep my like neutral distance so I'm not harming myself and just wishing them well. But like no one learns by getting screamed at. No one learns by getting like preached to when they don't want to hear it. Like we learn from each other by watching change behavior and then looking at outcomes. Like that's how humans are. It's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And so like I just do right and treat everybody like Aiko means love. That's my handle on Instagram, but it's true. Like it really does. And so like that's my work, just making everybody that I encounter feel like they're seen, that they're heard, and that like I care for them, period, regardless of whatever kind of harm you're causing. Like you're only getting love from me and peace. That's it. And no energy. I stand for things, like not against them,
Mm.
focus this way. That's what practice does for you. Focus on the good.
Yeah. And, just to emphasize, like, I think in the wellness world, we can kind of have this like peace and love, everybody, right? And that sense of that's not really moving the needle forward. And that there needs to be some like we just can't like, you see this on social media, like prayers and love isn't enough,
Right.
right? And so that combination, I think, of what you're sharing, just adding a huge asterisk to that, because and an exclamation mark of like, yes, prayers and love, and standing for something, and that action that you're talking about, like standing for what matters to you and sending that compassion and care to self and others.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's what they say, right? Like your energy flows where your attention goes. Like, why would I give any of that, like any of my energy? Like when I don't want that. Like what I want is equity and inclusion and belonging and everybody to feel a sense of wellness so they could show up fully and live up to their fullest potential. So like all my energy is there, not to say that like people calling out and bringing like the heat and the fire is not necessary. It is, it completely is. That's for me personally, that's just not my lane. And so I think everybody needs to, whatever their passions are that are just authentic within you, like this podcast and you being a teacher yourself, like this is your lane, this is how you can contribute, and that's what you do. And so same goes for me. This is how I can contribute to like a loving, more connected future where we care about inclusiveness and belonging. So pick a lane and then fill it with love.
I love that. What a beautiful way to bring our conversation to a close. Aiko, where can people learn more about you and your work?
Sure. I am the community director at Netwomen, where, yes, honey, where we gather multiple times a month, like female leaders from around the globe, where we exchange ideas about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And then we all have businesses and we're thought leaders and just mingling with each other. So netwomen.co, I'm there. Aiko Means Love on Instagram and Facebook, and then Aiko May Smith on LinkedIn. I'm just everywhere. So
And how lucky are we? Thank you so much for being here.
thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Centered in the City. I welcome you to pause with me here and just check in with yourself. And I welcome you to just bring awareness to your own mind and body and notice if there's any suffering present. And suffering can mean many things. It can mean feelings of anxiousness. It can be feelings of discomfort, stress, lingering emotions or big emotions, heartbreak, heartache, guilt, shame, whatever it may be. And may you offer yourself a moment of compassion for that suffering that's present. May I be unconditionally kind to myself. May I know that I'm just human, that this is a human experience. May I know other people just like me have these similar or same experiences. May I give myself the compassion and care I need. I welcome you to join Aiko and I on Instagram and continue the conversation of offering lots of love and care for ourselves and each other as we continue to dismantle the harm that's created internally and externally. Thanks for being here as always.